Welcome to the Happy, Healthy Life Podcast with your hosts, Rob and Randy, who reveal the truth, the lies, and confusion about health so that you are no longer the victim to mainstream medical dogma and you are the hero to your own happy, healthy story.
Hey guys, welcome to the Happy Healthy Life Podcast. I am Rob and this is
Randy. Welcome back, guys.
Yeah, happy Friday to you guys. That's when we upload the podcast. So hopefully you guys are loving the podcast today. We are going to be talking about whether or not your genes or having bad genetics are responsible for your weight gain. So do you feel like your jeans are fitting tighter than you'd like them to, and you're blaming your genes on that? See what I did there?
That was very clever.
You like that? But the reality is a lot of people think that their genes control what it is that they weigh. But before we get into that, let's just review just in case you missed the podcast episode last week. We talked about age and whether or not we're supposed to gain weight as we get older, or why it is that so many people struggle as they get older to lose weight. So let's just quickly review that. And the answer to that is your age responsible for your weight gain? The answer to that is
absolutely not. It's and we've really been talking about really the main myths the last several weeks about why somebody would struggle with their weight. And a lot of times we think it's what you're eating, or you're not exercising enough, or it's your age, or it's like we're going to talk about today, it's your genetics. And really none of those are true in regards to what you weigh. So let me just say this. If you struggle with your weight and you struggled for a long time, even if it's been a recent struggle, it may not be your fault, right? It's that okay to just to say that. And some people would say, no, trust me, Dr. Randy, it is my fault.
Okay, maybe a little bit your fault.
Okay, it's maybe a little bit your fault, but on a serious note, it may not be your fault. It may be your metabolism. And that's really at the end of all this, as we've talked about it, we're really bringing you back to what controls what people weigh, and that is the health of your metabolism. And the great news is you can have a healthy metabolism at any age, whoever your parents are, even without having to be perfect with your nutrition or spend hours a day in the gym. Your metabolic rate and the health of your metabolism controls what you weigh. And for a lot of people who struggle, you're beating yourself up. So stop asking the question, how do I lose weight? Start asking, how do I fix my metabolism? And then also give yourself a hug, give yourself a break. It isn't your fault. It's something else may be going on. And that's what we want to help you get to. Let's help you get to the cause of why you're struggling.
Yeah, let's do that. And so some of the steps that we even talked about last week in overcoming that age, and we always go back to this, is know what's happening with your metabolism, know why it's slowing down, assess, don't guess, and then have a specific plan once you know what's going on. We talked about some things that you could do, like preparing your own meals so you're not eating all the crap and putting all the toxins into your body, which, as we know, we talked about those being endocrine disruptors, which will cause your body to store fat rather than burn it.
Yeah, it's almost guaranteed if you're eating out all the time, you're getting crushed with seed oil and artificial chemicals and sweeteners and sugars. It's just no way around it.
Yeah, so have a plan, right?
Yeah. And
then take action, follow that plan. We even talked about SCT oil, implementing that, the short chain triglycerides, and having a healthier gut, ready-made ketones to be able to get your body into fat burning. And so with that being said, so that's a recap of last week. Let's talk about genetics. And I was reading some research on what it says about genetics, and this actually comes from the CDC, right? And so here's what
that's
they said.
That's a real credible organization.
Yeah, a lot of people put a lot of credit into this, but here's what they said. They said that genetics can directly cause obesity and specific disorders such as Bardet-Biedl syndrome, I can't even pronounce it, and Prader-Willi syndrome. However, genes do not always predict health future. CDC, genes do not always predict health futures. Genes and behavior, or what we talk about a happy, healthy lifestyle, may both be needed for the person to be overweight. So you could have genes that people would say are, quote, bad genes, like I've got the short gene, right? And so I could say that that's a bad thing. But here's the thing, when it comes to genes do predict certain things about us, like maybe our eye color or our hair color, our skin color, our height, those kinds of things. And here's what's also really interesting though. And I don't remember if you had seen this study, but I can remember years ago looking at a research study that had been done with people with multiple personality disorders. And what they showed with these people, depending on what personality they were, they could actually change the expression of their eye color. And their eye color would change like from blue to green. You would have one personality that had diabetes and another personality that did not have diabetes. So what does that tell us? That that person has the same genes. Some genes were being expressed and some were not, which gets us into something that's more important to talk about than genetics, which is called
epigenetics. And so epi meaning above, genetics, obviously. So if epigenetics is really more powerful than your genetic code, and really the way I like to describe it, and I can't remember who I got this from, but it's a good example, is that genes, your genetic code, it loads the proverbial gun, but what pulls that trigger is your lifestyle and how you adapt to your environment. What environment have you created? Are you adapting chemically, physically, and emotionally to those stressors? So it's all about the environment, the adaptation, and your lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So here's the news that we all need to know is every single one of us, Dr. Rob, we all have a loaded gun. Every single one of us, genetics loaded this gun. Guns don't shoot themselves. Something has to pull the trigger. So one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Bruce Lipton, this is almost going to be a tribute to Dr. Bruce Lipton today with all the influence he's had on us and so many other healthcare professionals and just the general public. But he said that genes, by the way, he's a cellular biologist, genius guy, IQ probably too high to even count. He says that genes can't turn themselves on and off. Something that affects your internal environment has to trigger them. So quite simply, you have a genetic code. Is it expressing health, which would be the norm, or are you expressing symptoms, disease, and sickness, or obesity, or poor metabolic function, which is the abnorm, but it's not necessarily your genetic code, although we do see patterns run in families. I mean, I've seen it before. Is there a genetic predisposition potentially for somebody that maybe you see tons of overweight people in a particular family who have the same genetic code? Yes, that's common. But like we've talked about, it is not normal. It's that causation versus correlation. It's a tendency potentially, but not some metabolic death sentence. So I give the example always, if you showed up to the scene of an accident and there's a fire and you see the fire truck there, you take note of that and you put that and upload that into your file. And every time you keep seeing an accident with fire, you keep seeing fire trucks. So what starts to happen is you start to think maybe these fire trucks are causing the fires. But the reality is we know, are these fire trucks causing the fires?
No,
clearly not. So that's, causation versus correlation. So genes, once again, there may be that loaded gun that we all have, but it's not normal to be overweight. It's not normal to get cancer. It's not normal to be sick. Remember, your genes are programmed to express health, life, and vitality, and that's controlled by how you adapt to your environment and your lifestyle.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because from a practical standpoint, for people that have thought that maybe it does run in their family, that's what I used to believe. So I believe that it ran in my family because as young as I can remember, my mom had always struggled with her weight. So she was always chronically on a diet. So because then I started then struggling with my weight, I thought I was supposed to. We saw other family members that struggled with their weight. So I'm like, all right, I'm doomed. It's got to be my genetics.
Right.
And so then I don't know if we've talked about this before, then became anorexic, stopped eating in order to lose weight, because I believed what we talked about on previous episodes, that it was calories in and calories out. If I can decrease my calories for a long enough period of time, then I'll lose the weight. And I did. But what we also know is that destroys metabolic function. So if that destroys metabolic function, you are sure to then struggle with your weight throughout your lifetime if you're then that chronic dieter, which was me. So I did struggle with my weight. And so when I would get to a certain weight, and if you're that person that you've gone on a diet, you've tried to lose weight, there's that one number on the scale that you can never get below for whatever reason. For me, it was 180 pounds. If I got to 179 pounds, I'd go right back up to 180. If I went to 176 pounds, I'd go right back up to 180. And we've talked about that being your metabolic thermostat, right? It's what it's been programmed to do. However, once we started applying the principles that we know now to be true based on the science behind how it is you heal the metabolism, I was able to bust through that 180 and go all the way down to, gosh, I'm 150 now. And so, but I did that because it was a physiologic shift that happened inside my body, not a genetic shift, because I didn't all of a sudden go pick different parents, right?
Yeah,
so I've got the same mom and dad.
Right. So nothing changed genetically for you.
Zero.
If you're listening and watching right now, your genes are your genes, and that is not changing. So none of us get to pick different parents. So really, almost if we believe that our weight and our struggles with our health are genetically positioned, then really there's nothing you can do. It's almost that get out of jail free card where you feel like, well, because I've got bad genetics, then there's nothing really I can do because I can't change my genetic code. I mean, you've got now how many healthcare professionals and doctors are doing genetic testing and looking for these genes that we know don't turn themselves on by themselves versus focusing on the lifestyle component and creating the correct environment where you do adapt to your chemical, physical, and emotional stress, which is the epigenetic component of how you express life. So for you, you were basically starving yourself, which is really what diets are. You're just starving yourself. You're wrecking your metabolism. You were blaming your mom. She was blaming you, as we found out.
Yeah.
And nobody was really teaching you or me at that time, really, what really is going on here. It's too convenient an answer to go, you know what? It just must be my mom and dad. And now I don't have to take responsibility. I'm a victim to my bad genes. And so, que sera, sera, what will be, without taking that action, that critical action that we all can take to make sure that we're expressing the normal, which is robust health and healthy metabolic function.
Yeah. So let's talk about then where our parents do matter.
Yeah.
Because then when you look at the research, then if you're like, okay, if it's not the genes that I was born with, then what is it? And Bruce Lipton even writes about this, and he's like, yeah, absolutely. Parents do matter. And here's what it says. It says, these complex creatures, and I'm talking about these creatures being babies, right? Before we're even born, when we're in the womb and we're developing. And as we're developing, what's the first thing that develops inside the human body? It's your central nervous system,
Yep.
right? So your central nervous system is what controls and animates every single function in your body. So as we're in the womb, it's that central nervous system that's going to tell your gut to become your gut. It's telling your heart to become your heart and not an eyeball, right? It's dictating and controlling all of the creation of all the cells inside the body, but it's also interpreting data from what's happening from mama to the inside as well. And here's what they're talking about. In the research, they said these small complex creatures have pre-birth life in the womb that profoundly influences their long-term health and behavior. The quality of life in the womb, our temporary home before we were born, programs our susceptibility to things like coronary artery disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, and a multitude of other conditions later on in life, writes Dr. Peter Nathanielis in his book, Life in the Womb. So basically what he was saying is the interpretation of information that's going into the central nervous system is what was determining the likelihood of these different diseases later on in life, not the genes. It wasn't the genes, it was the interpretation and now the expression of that nervous system and the programming of the nervous system that was doing it. So if you think about this from very early on and you look at the development of the brain, there's really two parts of your brain. There's a conscious brain. The conscious brain is making decisions based on the intellectual nature of what's coming into it. So if you're driving down the road and if you see a car in front of you, it's probably going to be a good idea to move out of the way so you don't hit them. And I just experienced that, right? I just had a car accident last week.
I'm consciously looking at this cup of coffee, bringing it to my mouth and drinking it. That is a very conscious, intentional thought that I have right now.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have your subconscious part of your brain. And it's the subconscious.
Yeah, the autopilot almost.
That's what's really running the show. It's not the intellectual part of the brain. It's the subconscious that's running the show. So case in point, driving a car. Okay. If you're driving a car, if you've ever done this before, because I know I've done it before, where you're just driving and you don't necessarily remember getting onto the highway. You don't really remember getting off of the highway. You just know what your destination is, and your body's kind of just on autopilot as you're getting there. And sometimes you wonder, wow, I didn't have to think about getting here.
Totally.
Right. That's your subconscious brain that's doing
it's a
that.
little freaky too sometimes.
It's super freaky.
Yeah.
So what we know then in the development of a child, they are watching everything around them to determine what their belief is going to be about certain things. So as I was reading the research, to me, this blew my mind. And what it was talking about is how instinctually babies, when they're created, can actually swim. They don't come with a fear of swimming at all. Okay. So, so if you look at a child, for example, they're actually mesmerized, and having 3 kids, they're mesmerized by the water. They don't have any fear of that. And as we learned from a seminar that we were just at this past weekend, they were talking about there's 2 fears that a baby has when they're born. One is a fear of falling, and the other one is a fear of loud noises. Mm-hmm. It's not water. Okay. So where children learn to have this fear of water is from their parents, and their parents saying things like, don't stand next to the side of the pool because if you fall in, you'll drown and you could die. Right. And so it's the parent that has the fear of the kid going into the water,
totally.
Not the kid. Totally. So they're learning those things. So if we're learning those things, imagine all the other things that we're learning from a lifestyle perspective. What are the choices that the parent is making about the foods that the parent is eating? Because that's what that kid is then going to eat. I know the 3 of my kids have never had a soda because we never drank sodas, right? It was just part of our lifestyle. And occasionally, I know now their friends, that they drink them, and our kids wanted to know what they tasted like. They would sneak them to be able to taste that, but it's not something that they would do or choose to do on a regular basis because of their belief in what those sodas actually do to their body. They have now an understanding of that, but subconsciously that's not going to be the first thing that they order. So if you're ever out to eat with my kids, they always order the same exact thing. They always order water. And I'm also the dad that's like, hey, if they want to order lemonade, I'm like, order the lemonade, but they don't choose to do that because subconsciously they've formed that belief. So as parents, we do matter when it comes to what's going into our children, and don't think for a second that they're not watching. And so I know that as I was looking at the choices my mother was making, and I'm not throwing her under the bus, she didn't know. She wasn't educated on what it is that we're talking
Absolutely.
about right now. And so it's not her fault.
No,
but she just learned that from her parents and her parents. Right. And so then I was just doing the same stuff. So I think we can't lose sight of the fact that the subconscious mind is very powerful. I mean, look at the relationships that people choose. They'll choose the same type of person over and over and over and over. It's not because they have a gene for being in a bad relationship. No, it's a pattern that they've learned because somehow that is fulfilling some kind of need inside of them to be able to have that type of person or take them through something that they need to learn. And that's a whole different conversation, way above our pay grade as far as talking about relationships. But with all the work that I've done, I can correlate it to that work that I've done for internal healing, that yes, the brain, the subconscious mind, and the decisions that we make that are on autopilot are huge. And we learn those from the very beginning.
Yeah, those thoughts do help express your genetic code. So you can think yourself healthy, you can think yourself sick. And that's really one of the major differences between people that overcome and people that do not. I want to take it back really quickly just on a basic genetic relationship with obesity or weight struggles. I always go back, and I've told this story a lot, but we could probably all have a very similar story, especially if you're near our age. I graduated high school in 1992 from Pleasant Grove High School, Texarkana, Texas. Go Hawks. But I remember there was probably like 120, 130 kids in my graduating class 30 years ago. And Rob, I remember there was a handful of my classmates that were overweight or obese, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 kids out of 120, 130 kids. So you look at it now 30 years later and you go to a school, and what do we now see in our school system? What would you say the percentage is?
Oh, it's super high.
Yeah, I think they're saying
it's probably like over 60%.
Yeah. And we know this is the fastest growing group in our communities who are struggling with their weight are the children, the adolescents. If you go to a school now, you got 30, 40, 50, maybe 60% of these kids are struggling. So the point of this is, think about it. 30 years ago, this wasn't an issue. Think about when you graduated high school, back when you were in grade school, 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe 50 years ago, you just didn't see this. So I remember one of our patients years ago, she was a genetic researcher. And so we asked her, we're like, hey, listen, how long would it take genes to mutate to the point where you went from a non-epidemic into a current epidemic, which right now, let's just call it what it is. Obesity right now, it's a full-blown epidemic in our country. And she said, the science doesn't support having a genetic epidemic. In fact, it's impossible to have a genetic epidemic. And here's why. For cells to mutate to the point of epidemia, you would have to have 20, maybe 25,000 years for that to occur. She said some research would suggest maybe 100,000 years for genes to mutate. So clearly it's only been 30. I find it hard to believe that 10% of my school was overweight 30 years ago, and now 50% of kids are overweight 30 years later. I don't know that it's scientifically possible for all of a sudden our genes just to crash, mutate, and make us all fat. The reality is it's not true. There is no such thing as a genetic epidemic. Genes are a tendency. They're not a metabolic death sentence, which is why we need to go back to what really controls all of this and why we're in the situation that we're in with lifestyle and adapting to our environment.
Yeah, we have a poor lifestyle epidemic is what we have, because everybody is teaching people to, it's all about comfort, right? Screw the discipline. You know what? Go for the candy bar now. Go for the donut now because it tastes good. It's going to help make you comfortable right now. Worry about it later on down the road. But you know what? For a lot of people, later on down the road comes up a lot faster than you think. Life is freaking short. I was just at a funeral this past Friday, and I'm like, you know what? Things can happen, in a split second. So if that's the case, you know what? I would rather choose discomfort now of not having that sugar. And by the way, this is no sugar September for me, just so you know, 0 sugar at all for the entire month of September. I'm committed to that right now, this minute. You guys heard it here. And so the thing is, and I say that because you know what, I want to make sure that I'm taking care of my body. And so I would pick discomfort now rather than resentment later.
Absolutely.
And so that's where it is. So
yeah, I in fact, this is one of the things that I've thought about over the years. We've been in the health and wellness industry now for going on 25 plus years between the both of us. And I've never ran any genetic testing with any client or any patient. I know that you haven't either. Yet how have we gotten over all these years, all these incredible health transformations, these weight loss results, these metabolic changes, helping people come off medication, take charge of their health without running any genetic testing? We must be the luckiest 2 doctors in the whole freaking world that the only people who walked into our door needing our help were the genetically elite and the people with superior genetics predispositions from their mom and dad. How lucky are we? The reality is we're not that lucky. Trust me, nobody's that lucky. We were working with people just like you, just like me, just like everybody else, who've got this genetic framework, and all they needed was somebody to go, here's what you can do to optimize what God gave you. You've got God's DNA. Don't get it twisted. God created you in his own image. You were designed to live an abundant, amazing life. And I know there's people thinking, well, what about my brother that was born with this condition? And what about, I had a brother born with a genetic condition, Apert syndrome. No doubt about it. Was that a real genetic issue that couldn't be overcome with lifestyle? No doubt about it. But we don't deal in the 0.001%. And that's what those are. We live in the real world, and the real world says if you're listening now, it's almost statistically impossible that you have some bad genetic framework that's keeping you from reaching your ideal health.
Yeah. So let's talk about the solutions, and let's talk about solutions as being the things that we can do something about, the things that we can control, and stop being lazy and saying, hey, it just must be my genetics, right? Because that's a convenient excuse for not having the discipline to make better lifestyle choices. So,
well, that's also too, in a lot of people's defense, it's because they've heard their doctor,
their subconscious has been programmed.
Yeah, their doctor is just a blabbering moron half the time, going, yeah, it's your age, it's your genes, and we believe that crap, which is convenient for them because it's a lazy damn answer. And now they've got you hooked on drugs because you're a victim. It's permanent, nothing you can do. Take our pills. You have some genetic condition. It's ridiculous on every single level.
And remember, don't think for a second that your medical doctor is working for you. Your medical doctor is working for the pharmaceutical industry.
You got it.
You've got the pharmaceutical reps coming in there. They're whining, they're dining them. They've got quotas to meet. Don't forget that. If you want to see that in action, go to one of the coffee shops that are closest to the hospital in your town. Go in there. You're going to see
eye-opening.
You're going to see everybody in their logoed scrubs talking and strategizing what they're going to do for that day and what doctors are going to go see. That is a very, very real thing. If you don't believe me, go do it. Go to a coffee shop next to a hospital.
Yeah.
You'll see it.
Doctor means teacher. What the heck are they teaching us?
Nothing. So
doesn't seem like it.
No, we are though. So here's what we got to do. Okay, here's the solution. Number one is the solution to overcoming the genetics. You got to pick different parents.
Yep, that's not going to happen.
Okay, so that's
that was out.
Yeah, we can't control it.
Scratch that one off.
Okay.
Next.
So the next thing that you can do is you can renew your mind and replace old beliefs. Start reprogramming your subconscious mind.
Yes.
And what's the easiest way to do that? The easiest way to do that is, well, get information, get knowledge, like listen to the podcast, but don't just listen to the podcast because that's not real knowledge. Knowing or knowledge is having wisdom. It's applying that wisdom. So it's applied wisdom.
Yeah, Hosea 4:6, which is what the Bible talks about, for a lack of knowledge, people perish, right? So what you're saying, it's not just knowing, it's the application, the doing of that information. Because information doesn't change crap. How much information's out there yet? We're more sick, more obese than ever before.
Yeah. So you got to do it. So you know what? We talked about it last week, and we talked about it before. Is even like introducing the short chain triglyceride or SCT oil. Just put it in your coffee first thing in the morning. Take a tablespoon of it. Just start there. Do that once a day, every single day. That's action. So you got to start applying these things that we're talking about and making better lifestyle choices. And think of yourself. You know, when I started, it changed everything. When I started looking at the body that God created, and utilizing my body, and I talked about this last time, as a vessel for learning, a vessel for love, but also a vessel for actually giving that love to others. So the best thing that I could do with what it is that we do in the health industry is be an unbelievable model for that. And even when I was at that funeral on Friday, people were like, oh my gosh, you look great. And it's not about vanity and all about looks. And when they were like, what have you been doing? And because I was there with people that I'd gone to high school with, you know, when I was growing up, I'm like, you know what? I've just been doing what it is that we teach. That's it. Nothing any different than the things that we teach. I've just been doing them on a daily basis, consistently living that lifestyle. And you know what? And it's a fun lifestyle. Don't think for a second that you're like, all right, if I'm going to have to eat healthy all the time or do this, it changes the fun factor. No, the fun factor is still there. You can have lots of fun and being healthier. And you know what? I think it's way more fun.
We never had more fun in our life at this point. And
seriously.
So being full of energy and looking and feeling your best, having ultimate supreme confidence, funnest life you'll ever live, no doubt about it. And I love what you said, because one of the ways we can honor and worship God is to honor him with our body. It is not ours. It is his. And what a privilege it is that he gave us this body, this life, and this purpose. And what a way to give back and say, you know what, God, I'm going to make some good choices. Not perfect. None of us are. Does God still love you if you drink a can of soda? Does he still love you if you're overweight? Absolutely. But the reality is, once you know better, start doing better. And God puts people in your life to create real tension and change. And if you're open to that, It can be life altering, which is what happened to me years ago. It's what happened to you. And I want to go back as we're closing here. And Bruce Lipton said this. I thought it was really good going back to the knowledge. He said, that knowledge, right? Knowledge is power, which we know it's really the application of knowledge, which is the power, which is Hosea 4:6. But what he said, if knowledge is power, then a lack of knowledge is a lack of power. And what that means is if you believe that you don't have the knowledge and you don't have the power, you don't believe you've got the ability to control your destiny and to do the things it takes to get the life that you want. Don't let anybody ever lie to you and tell you either you're a victim to your genetics, your age, and there's nothing you can do. It is a lie. Get the wisdom, gain the knowledge, put it into application, take control of your life. It really is up to you. Like we always say, nobody's coming to save you. You're your best advocate. You're your best doctor. Go for it. Go after it. We're here to help. That's why we do what we do. And we're going to hold each other accountable more than ever before, Dr. Rob. You and I are going to be the happy, healthy guys on point, living, breathing, and teaching what we believe in so much that we know, because we believe it so much, it's going to infiltrate and go into other people's lives and help them live these same lives. Not that their life is perfect, but I can tell you, living life by intention is a great, great life.
Yeah. So you said something. You said, don't let somebody lie to you. You know what? I think even trumps that. You don't freaking look at yourself in the mirror and lie to yourself.
There you go.
And you don't tell yourself that you're a victim to the circumstances.
I think that person lying to you may be you.
Right. That's exactly right. I saw a meme the other day. It's like a grizzly bear, and it said something like, when I finally figured out who was the problem here, he looks in the mirror and he like rips down the mirror because he's looking at himself and he thinks he's attacking another grizzly bear. And so I think that's a huge epidemic right there. It's just like looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, hey, you know what? I'm a victim of whatever the circumstance is. So don't let anybody teach you, or don't ever believe that you're missing something on the inside. You have everything that you need on the inside in order to be able to heal, to be healthy, to be well. That right there is what we do with Happy Healthy, is teaching you that.
Yeah. 1 John 4:4, greater is he that's inside of you than he that's in the world. That's not even a religious statement, guys. It's an immutable law. The greatest doctor is on the inside. I choose to work with that doctor because when I do, I get great, great results.
Absolutely. Love that. So with that being said, the action step for this week is like this, share it, review it. You know what? Give this love, give this information to other people so that they can be able to live a happier, healthy life.
Amen. Love that. Love you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Happy Healthy Life podcast. If you enjoy the show, make sure to follow them on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at The Happy Healthy Guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.